Okay. Do you just want me to go up to anybody? Okay. Hi. Hi, I'm Rose. Is it okay if I speak with you today? I'm with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program.
That's fine, although I'm not a member, I did not organize this, so you might get better information.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It seems like you're participating right now, so I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay? Okay, well first, what is your name? And what are you studying?
My name is Campbell Al-Kafaji. I'm studying sustainability studies.
Okay, awesome. And what brings you here today?
I'm a member of the UF College Democrats. I'm on their environmental caucus, and then I'm also with Climate Action Gator and a couple of other social justice groups, so this is what I'm passionate about, and so I'm happy to be here.
Okay, awesome. Do you want to elaborate on that more? Or?
Yeah, so basically the sort of censorship of UF students and Florida-wide students, and the increase in not only just I'm trying to think of the way that I want to say it. It's not even just limits on academic freedom, it's becoming discrimination, and it's becoming hostile, and it's kind of going unchecked at the moment, especially in colleges across Florida. So I think it's really important that Florida students, because this could become the rest of the nation very easily, especially with DeSantis thinking of running for president. So I think it's really important that here now in Florida we can show DeSantis, we can show the conservative far right, not even far right, just right at this point, what happens when you try to spread hate, honestly, in our education system.
Absolutely. And then my last question to you is, what do you want the future of Florida education to look like?
I would love if the future of Florida education was inclusive, and I would love if it was accurate. I feel like the direction that we are heading in is just incorrect. It's erasing a lot of Black history, a lot of queer history, a lot of marginalized communities, and I think it's decreasing the quality of our education. I don't expect we'll keep top 5 for much longer if we continue in this direction. So I feel like that's not a lot to ask for inclusivity, for equity, and for accuracy, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad you're here. So have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to see what the rest of this organization has for us today.
Yeah, what are you affiliated with? I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear it.
The Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. So when historical events such as this happens, we come out and see what the community, has to say about it, and then we archive it normally into the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program so that future researchers or future participants or future people in the community or outside of the community can look at it.
That's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please check us out. Have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you. You were all black, I wore all black. Yeah. But you ate. I did not eat. You ate. Don't say that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for hosting me. I don't even know how to taste that one.
Where can I get information about the Mississippi trip?
Yeah, we should have had it here, but I can get the form for you right now.
Okay, thank you.
I don't even know how to taste that one.
Where can I get information about the Mississippi trip?
Yeah, we
All right, everyone, so we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We still have a lot of folks doing walkout activities. Welcome to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, Can't Ban Us, Black Studies Program. How are y'all doing? All right. So we're going to learn a lot of really cool information today. We're going to provide you updates on what's happening across the state and the country in terms of support for Black studies. And one of the exciting things I have to share with you, and by the way, my name is Paul Ortiz. I'm a professor of history, and I direct the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program here at University of Florida. I also have the great honor of being the president of the United Faculty of Florida, AFL-CIO. And I wanted to bring greetings from our statewide chapter, United Faculty of Florida. Our union is in 100% in support of the statewide Black Studies walkouts and teach-ins that are occurring across the state. Now, I'm using this mic. You may wonder why, because it's not amplified, but this is for our Zoom feed. And we have, during the course of from 12 to 3, we're going to have more and more people joining us via Zoom. And one of the exciting things I have to report to you as we're getting started is that there are high school and college and university students all over the state that this very moment are walking out of their classrooms in support of Black studies and African American history. Yesterday, I was with a group of students at San Jose City College in California. They shared with me that students in the Silicon Valley area in California and the Bay Area are walking out in support of Black studies in the state of Florida. So it's really cool. I mean, what do y'all think about that? It's amazing to think about. And as a professor, it really heartens me because when people are walking out for the right to like read more, that's exciting. I'm like, hey, I didn't even have to sign that. That's really cool. While we're waiting for our two MCs to arrive, we're going to be doing like some special events throughout the afternoon. One of them, we called it a kind of a raffle. I brought some of my books to donate, and I thought instead of doing a raffle kind of thing, we would kind of do a Black History Month quiz throughout the 3 hours, right? And so I have a signed copy of African American Latinx History of the United States, which I wrote, and I want to give this book out for free. I've signed the copy, but you're going to have to earn it, okay? So my question to start the day is, who was the founder of Black History Month? Does anyone know? It should go to a student. Faculty, you're exempt from this, by the way. Students, who is the founder of what initially was Negro History Week, then Negro History Month, now Black History Month? If you can answer that question, you get a free signed copy of this book, students. Again, the faculty are like, let me answer that. Any guesses? Okay, yes. Carter G. Woodson, you have correct, all right. And your name is Brooke? All right, so Brooke is the winner of the first book for answering, Carter G. Woodson, the founder of initially Negro History Week, Negro History Month, Black History Month now. And it's so important to know this story because Carter G. Woodson worked his entire life to build, to teach, to publish, to promote Black History Month, not just within our classrooms and our campuses, but all over the world. He was frequently maligned because he was doing this work in the early 20th century. People attacked him. They would say, well, Professor Woodson, why isn't there a White History Month? And he'd say, we don't need a White History Month. Every day is White History Month. We need a Black History Month because people don't know our stories. And in 1923, in the state of Florida, in 1923, the state of Florida basically decided what Black history was. In 1923, the state of Florida decided what Black studies was. In 1923, the state of Florida told Black people and all people in Florida what to study in terms of Black studies. Now, unfortunately, the state of Florida is still trying to do it in 2023. That's a century later. Do they have the right to do that? No. Black studies is an incredible discipline. I wanted to share with you while we're waiting for our MCs to show up. This is a list of my colleagues who participated in creating and doing scholarship, in sacrificing, in spending their entire careers in teaching, in research, and service, in doing Black studies, in doing Black history, in doing Black arts, and doing Black literature. These scholars here were banned from the AP African American Studies curriculum in the state of Florida. And so this list of scholars is circulating around. Please check up on it, take a look at the list of faculty. Many of my faculty colleagues here and many graduate students know these colleagues personally. When I look at this list of scholars that the state of Florida has banned from the AP African American Studies curriculum, it hurts me personally. because these are my friends, these are my mentors, these are my colleagues. So when I look at Rod Ferguson, he's one of the leading scholars of Black queer studies in the United States of America. He's been banned from the AP Studies curriculum by the state of Florida. And I talked to him just 2 days afterwards, and he was distraught about this. He was personally grieved and injured for being banned. I don't know how many of you have ever had a book or an article banned. I have. In fact, that book that Brooke just won, African American Latinx History of the United States, was banned in the San Antonio, Texas school district recently. I have family from San Antonio. So at some point, I have to explain to a nephew or a niece in San Antonio, Texas, why their uncle's book was banned. That's a difficult discussion to have. Is there something wrong with Paul Ortiz or Rod Ferguson or Angela Davis or Robin D.G. Kelly, another scholar banned from AP African American Studies? Robin Kelly, a mentor to all people who do African American history in this country, one of the most important scholars of the 21st century, just banned from AP African American Studies. Entire topics, feminism, banned. Black Lives Matter movement, banned from AP African American Studies in Florida. The Black Lives Matter movement may be the largest social movement in American history. How can you ban the largest social movement in American history from a curriculum? That's just an open question. That is like, how many of you read that book, George Orwell's 1984? That's like memory hole stuff. But it's even worse because like the Black Lives Matter movement, it didn't just happen, it's still ongoing. Toni Morrison's books are being banned in this state more quickly than I can even speak. They're flying out the shelves. I talk to librarians in South and Central North Florida, and almost every day I get a call from a distraught librarian. Paul, my district has just ordered me to take Toni Morrison's Bluest Eye, Sula, Beloved, Paradise, and put them in deep storage, taking Toni Morrison off of the shelves of Florida public libraries in our schools. That's happening every day in the state of Florida. What are we going to do about it? That's part of what we're doing today at today's teach-in. So at today's teach-in, you're going to hear from a lot of amazing people. You're going to hear from student activists throughout the state. You're going to hear from incredible Black Studies faculty here. You're going to hear from undergraduates here who are doing Black Studies, who are living Black Studies, and we're going to learn a lot. I'm going to learn a lot. I'm so excited and thrilled. But as we're listening and learning, we want us all to think about what are we going to do at 3:01 p.m. when this event is finished? What are we going to do individually and collectively to save and restore Black Studies in the state of Florida, so that when people look at this list, instead of seeing marks over the names of Kimberly Crenshaw, a dear friend and colleague of mine, I was just on a panel with her last week, the most brilliant legal scholar, I think, in the country, banned from Florida AP Black Studies. What are we going to do so that this list no longer has cross marks, checks across people like Eduardo Bonilla Silva, another dear friend, top scholar, sociologist at Duke University? How do you ban him, state of Florida, from Black Studies? Like, I don't get it. So what are we going to do to undo the ban? What are we going to do to restore and preserve and promote Black Studies and African American history in Black History Month and beyond in a way that would make people like Carter G. Woodson, who founded Black History Month back in the day, proud as an ancestor, as a person who realizes, hey, you all have struggles now. You're facing an uphill battle. You're squaring off against an entire state and its propaganda apparatus, which says that Black studies and African American history is but a trendy ideology. And when I wake up in the morning and I read that stuff, I mean, it hurts my heart. It terrifies me because I think we're in a society that's rapidly moving towards authoritarianism. We're already there. And some people are even using the term fascism, okay? So that's scary stuff. But again, I want us to think about what was it like for Carter G. Woodson back in the 1920s? Because those scholars who made it possible for us to be here today also faced tremendous obstacles. When you tell the truth in any society, you're going to face obstacles. But anyone can tell you that anything that's meaningful in life is worth fighting for, right? So again, as we're kind of waiting for my MCs to come up here, I hope they're here pretty soon. I don't want to keep on talking. Oh, good, okay. We have, like I said, we'll have events, kind of interactive things throughout the day. We have some easels going around. We're going to do another book raffle in a few minutes. But let me right now turn the microphone over to an amazing student here at the University of Florida, Sophia de la Cruz, who has been a great staff person at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. She was part of an amazing student team that took us off campus to the Cotton Club Museum. I don't know how many of you know where the Cotton Club Museum is, but that is an important Black history site in not only in Gainesville, but in the entire state of Florida. And she took, I mean, over 100 of us went out there, and it's no more than a mile away from campus, and we learned so much just last week or the week before. So at this point, before I turn over the microphone to her, I have another book to raffle, and I'm going to come up with another Black History Month question to get a free signed copy of the book. And again, you have to be a student. Okay. Who is known as the most preeminent anti-lynching activist and journalist in American history? Who is known as the most important, preeminent, active, okay. Ida B. Wells, all right. And your name is?
Days.
Days, okay, thank you, Days. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the mic over to Sophia. Thank you all for your patience, and here we go.
Also, if any of y'all can't hear me in the back, just go like this, and I'll try to talk louder because I want everyone to be able to hear. So my name's Sophia de la Cruz. Currently, we're kind of, getting some student groups together to kind of discuss these things and discuss some different changes that we want made at the university. So I just wanted to say that throughout this event, if y'all have any questions, my co-leader, Krystin Anderson, will be here soon as well, and she'll do an introduction, but feel free to come up to me throughout the event, and I can kind of get you looped in, add you to any group chats, and kind of just get you involved in the work that we're doing to take action on these issues. So we're kind of going to go through a couple speakers through today, and then we'll have an opportunity for those who stay until the end to engage in an open mic. And as you see speakers come up, feel free to please take notes on what they're saying, ask them questions, and again, throughout the event, feel free to come up to me and I can kind of get you involved in how to stay a part of this work long term. So our first speaker will be Dr. Alyssa Cole. I don't know, are you good? Ready? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And again, if you can't hear me, please let me know, and I'll try to speak a little bit louder. So my name is Dr. Alyssa Cole. I'm a professor in African American Studies, the program here at the University of Florida. First, I want to thank the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program for putting this together, and Dr. Ortiz and everyone else who is involved. I just want to first say that the creation of Black Studies Department was initiated at the insistence and the activism of students. And so your support is so much appreciated. My program is currently in the process of trying to become a department, and student support of us is going to be incredibly useful as we continue moving forward through that process. So use your voices, and let everyone know that you support us becoming a department at the University of Florida. I actually graduated with a degree in African American history, and I have an MA in African American studies from the University of Kansas. And one of the things that makes Black studies so important to me is the ability to see myself and my history and the things that I experience in the subject matter that we are learning. And so what I teach at the University of Florida is about health disparities related to African Americans in the United States. And we look at the history of medicine, we look at the history of gynecology and how that developed. And we're trying to add what we understand about the history of medicine and insert ourselves in that. And so when we're looking at the history of gynecology, we're looking at the mothers of gynecology rather than just Dr. Marion Sims, who is known as the father of modern gynecology. Without the mothers of modern gynecology, we would not have the study of gynecology as it is today. We wouldn't have that profession. We wouldn't know what we know without the enslaved women that he used as experiments, but also as surgical experts at a time when Black women were supposedly unable to learn how to become proficient in any profession, but they were used at the same time as surgical experts. So it's so important to be able to learn this history and make connections with the origins of how the medical profession originated in the United States and the effects that we're seeing because of that today. And also, one of the other things that I wanted to mention is just the skills and the skills that we learn in Black studies and how important they are to different professions. One of the main arguments is that our discipline isn't useful for people who are graduating when they're going into different professions. And I just want to say personally that I have worked in so many different occupations. I've worked at the Environmental Protection Agency with my Black Studies degree. So these politicians who are saying that Black Studies degrees are not important, the government that they work for is hiring Black Studies majors. So I've also worked at the for the National Park Service at Broward versus Board of Education and Nicodemus Historical Site. I've worked for museums, and I've worked for arts alliances. And so there are so many different things that we can do with Black Studies degrees. And I'm so appreciative of you all being here and listening to us. And if you have any questions, or if you want to get in contact with me or anyone in my department, we are so happy to speak with you. There are anthropologists in our department, there are sociologists, there are people who teach English. There's so many different things that we can do with the Black Studies degree. So thank you all again for being here, and please get in touch with any of us in our department and let us know how we can help you, and we appreciate your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So now we have just a brief 15-minute period that we wanted to allow if anyone is interested in coming up to speak, share your thoughts, share why you value African American studies and generally learning a complete history. Does anyone want to come up and have an opportunity to share your thoughts right now? And if not, we can just move on to our next speaker. You want to speak too?
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Wait, does this work?
Yeah, this is for the...
Okay, cool. So, hi everyone. So my name is Timothy Sinclair. I'm a third-year philosophy major. I'm on the pre-law track, but my journey into the African American studies and that realm is kind of very interesting. So I got my first interest in African American study from Dr. David Canton. So he's the director. And basically I was out in Turlington and I just saw this guy and he was just pulling out flyers from his book bag. And I'm like, what is he doing? You know what I'm saying? So I went over there and I looked, And then he was basically saying like, hey, brother, this is the African American Studies program here at UF. And then I was just like, okay, cool, I'm in philosophy right now. And then he was just like, okay, so what do you want to do? So, you know, of course, I was like, oh, I want to be a lawyer, pre-law track, the whole shebang, right? And then he was saying how, well, where you do understand that sometimes your constituents will be African American people. So are you interested in getting that perspective? That's what really opened my eyes and got me interested in African American studies. So when we're talking about lawmakers and how they feel like, oh, these types of studies are non-beneficial, when you're looking at people who study history, an example, right? They think those things are beneficial because we see the historical perspectives behind them. But if we're just doing a centralized focus around history, suddenly that becomes a problem. So that's one of the things that I personally didn't stand for, and one of the reasons I'm involved in a lot of different things in that realm right now. So right now I serve as the treasurer for the Sankofa Society, so that's a whole African American studies program that's basically wants to push the narrative that Black African American Studies does deserve its place on this campus, and here's all the innovative things we're doing, from professional development to basically just things like how to get those internships and studying abroad programs. But yeah, basically, honestly, the heart that comes into the program, all the things that will challenge your opinion, having that diverse perspective, all come together and kind of encompass African American Studies. That's what drew me in. So thank you guys for listening, and thank y'all for coming out today.
Does anyone else want to come up and share their thoughts, their experience at UF? Okay. So for now, our next speaker will be Dr. Sharon Austin.
Hey everybody, I hope you can hear me okay. They told me to speak for about 10 minutes, so I wrote some things down. But I wanted to talk a little bit. First of all, I want to mention my Virgil Hawkins t-shirt, because if you haven't heard of Virgil Hawkins, none of us would be here if it were not for him, especially none of us who are people of color. This is the man who filed a lawsuit in 1949. He was seeking admission to the University of Florida, and so for 9 years he waged a battle with the university, and eventually in 1958 the university, I guess grudgingly, agreed to desegregate the graduate program, and he dropped his lawsuit. So if it were not for him, none of us would be here, especially none of us who are people of color. So I just wanted to point that out. But I want to talk today a little bit about critical race theory and intersectionality, just to tell you what those theories are and what they mean, because I teach a class here, as many of you know, called The Politics of Race at UF, which is a Quest 1 class, and we talk about critical race theory, we talk about Virgil Hawkins, we talk about some of the first minority students here, and even some of the experiences that minority students continue to have on our campus. But today, the theme of what I want to briefly talk about is why are these theories so threatening to some people, critical race theory and intersectionality, and define what they are. And the theme of what I'm going to be talking about today is something that I think is pretty obvious. Thank you all for coming out, because I'm very impressed by the size of the crowd, and especially the crowd outside. We won't go back is the theme of what I'll be talking about. So I want to thank you. I want to begin by talking about something that I hope you've heard of, but you probably haven't, at the University of Florida, called the Johns Committee, which was in place from 1956 to 1965. So I'll just read a few things from my notes. Florida Senator Charlie Johns led a committee called the Florida Legislative Investigation Committee, and this was during a time period that was known as the Red Scare. The Johns Committee in Florida wanted to, quote, find communist connections and to, quote, purge integrationist organizations, academic liberals, and other subversives from educational institutions. So keep in mind, this was way back in the 1950s, 1960s, but you still hear some of the same type of language about liberals, subversives, to purge them from educational institutions. So you could even argue that this is the Johns Committee, I guess on a modern scale, what we're seeing now. So when the committee failed to demonstrate communist involvement within the NAACP or within the academic community, a desperate Charlie Johns sought to extend his committee's life by searching for a weaker enemy. And according to one report, the, quote, committee agents soon monitored lavatory stalls and private bedrooms rather than city buses, unquote. UF was the first academic target that was chosen in the search for homosexuals, quote unquote, in 1958. At least 15 UF professors and more than 50 students left the university after being interrogated by investigators. Even though the committee's tactics violated state law, UF administrators didn't attempt to halt the investigations. They basically were silent and went so far as to allow university police officers to investigate some of the allegations and to tape the interrogations of both professors and students. According to J. Wayne Wright, the former University of Florida president, he said this: Charlie Johns didn't have anything against the University of Florida as such. He wasn't trying to hurt the university. He was on a mission, by gosh, that he heard there were homosexuals on the faculty and he was going to get rid of them. So J. Wayne Wright defended the actions of Charlie Johns and the Johns Committee. So I just wanted to mention that to you because this is the danger that we're facing if we don't do something to fight back against the things that are happening in our state. This happened way back many, many years ago, but the same thing could easily happen again is the point I'm trying to make. So I want to define what critical race theory is. Critical race theories hold that racism is inherent in the law and legal institutions of the United States insofar as they function to create and maintain social, economic, and political inequalities between whites and non-whites. So that gives you a brief definition of what critical race theory is. Critical race theorists want to study and understand the institutional or structural nature of racism with the goal of eliminating racial discrimination. So that is the theory that you're hearing so much about, that people are saying so many horrible things about. It was organized in 1989 at the first annual workshop on critical race theory, but it really began during the 1960s and 70s in the critical legal studies movement, which examined the way in which the law and legal institutions serve the interests of the wealthy and powerful at the expense of the poor and the marginalized. So that's the definition of critical race theory. Intersectionality describes the ways in which discrimination on the basis of gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, and class, etc., intersect. So in other words, intersectionality is saying that, especially for women of color, especially for black women, that we have to deal with racism, sexism, and other types of isms as well. And it's used as a framework to study the discrimination that women of color in particular, and the intersection of these discriminations that women of color deal with. And so as a black female professor at UF, since 2001, I'm very familiar with the racial microaggressions that black women and men continue to endure on our campus because of my own experiences, because of my colleagues, and also because of my students. But the one thing I want to point out that I think we can all agree with is that UF is an awesome university, and we're all very proud to be members of this campus community. And that's why we're here today, because we want to make sure that we protect all the things that we've worked for over the years. However, I've had bad experiences here. I'm sure all of you have had bad experiences as well. So I want to just briefly talk a little bit about just some of the books that are probably going to be banned if we continue to allow the banning of books. And I want you to understand the full consequences of the Stop Woke Act, or HB 7, and also just the general banning of books and also the banning of theories like critical race theory and intersectionality. So I guess I want to first of all say that if we allow the banning of books, my upcoming book that will be published this year that talks about intersectionality and uses it as a framework to study the experiences of black women who have been elected as mayors of American cities. That book will be banned, even though I've been a professor here for over 20 years. It won't be available in our library. Dr. Paul Ortiz, who just mentioned the fact that his books, which are award-winning books, will also be banned. Because if they talk about race, if they use these theories, or if they in any way talk about discrimination, there's a very high likelihood that they'll be banned. And also my other 4 books will be banned as well, because all of them to some degree talk about race. Professor Ibram Kendi, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he is a very prominent historian. He began earlier in his career, he didn't begin his career here, but he is a former UF professor of history and African American studies. He now has received, I guess, national and international attention because of the books that he's written, and he's a historian. And when he was employed here, he won the National Book Award. And I may be wrong, but I think he was the youngest person ever to win that award. It's a very prestigious award. He was only 34 years old. We were very proud of him when he won for his book, Stamped from the Beginning, which has since been published in several languages, which is a comprehensive history of racism in America. It's approximately 500 pages. It's considered to be one of the best, I guess, histories ever written. But unfortunately, Ibram Kendi, because he is someone who is a very outspoken scholar, his book would be banned. Even though when he was here, I remember when he won the award, we had several receptions for him, but we had this huge reception for him. Everybody was happy, but now we're looking at the possibility that his book won't be in our own libraries or his other books as well. So that, again, is another consequence. And as I mentioned, Dr. Ortiz has written award-winning books. Several other faculty here who publish research that looks at racism, sexism, homophobia, any type of discrimination. There's a real threat that those books will be removed from our libraries, and you will not have access to those books at the University of Florida if we don't continue to fight this. And if we don't continue to fight this assault on academic freedom. So in conclusion, I just want to say this, that Black women in particular talk about intersectionality because whether people want to hear it or not, we experience discrimination on the basis of our race, gender, and for other reasons, and that these theories are very important, and it's also important that we continue to fight for our rights and to not be deprived of our rights. So thank you. All right. So who's next? Here you go. All righty.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. So now there's another short opportunity for students to come up if anyone is interested in saying a few words about, who would like to come up?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Alex. A lot of what I'm going to say is going to echo Dr. Austin, but probably a lot less eloquently. I came to UF in 2021 for law school, and in January of 2022, I started receiving gender-affirming care through the Equal Access Clinic, which is run by UF Health. The Equal Access Clinic is an invaluable resource both for students like myself who need care that fit within schedule or financial means, but even more so for low-income members of the Gainesville community, and for transgender people specifically, and especially trans people of color, who already face disproportionate rates of poverty, homelessness, and violence. A resource like the Equal Access Clinic that provides low to no cost healthcare is life-changing. It breaks barriers to transition, and it quite literally saves lives. But the DeSantis administration's attacks on gender-affirming care and his recommended budget that seeks to prohibit the use of state funds for gender-affirming care or abortion would rip access to necessary health care away from countless trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming folks. And this would have a disproportionate impact on low-income trans people that rely on university health systems for reliable care around the state and whose rights to care have already been stripped away from Medicaid. Access to trans health care was already a class issue, but this latest move against trans people from the DeSantis administration is just one of the many attacks happening right now in Florida on an intersection of identities that is moving to push Florida towards fascism. Expression of gender identity intersects the experiences of race and class in our society. Those who exist in these intersections are the most vulnerable to the onslaught of violent, racist, and bigoted legislation being passed in the Florida Capitol. The DeSantis administration wants to erase the realities of trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and queer Floridians. And the DeSantis administration also wants to rewrite the history of the reality of Black history. Legislation like House Bill 7, also known as the Stop Woke Act, censors the history of Black Floridians. As many of you know, and as Dr. Austin has said, it criminalizes the teaching of the historical truth of our nation and state. We are a society built on slavery, a nation built on the exploitation of Black labor. Our state has time and time again legitimized direct and infrastructural violence, disrupting historically Black communities like Santos, like Newmansville, and like Rosewood. Communities that have established the land and made it their home only to be razed by the state. Their stories have been sentenced to silence. The Florida legislature is dissevering the connections of communities. They are disrupting the process of reparations and healing. DeSantis wants to divide movements of liberation by weaponizing identities and categories that they have placed us in, categories established by colonialism and white supremacy. Now, because of my race, I cannot pretend that I understand the Black experience, and I know that I'm afforded great privilege with my whiteness, but I do know how it feels to be targeted. Similar to how he has targeted Black communities and other marginalized groups, DeSantis has targeted my community, including by auditing our private health care records. This is an egregious violation of our civil rights and an extension of attacks on the right to privacy and bodily autonomy in a post-Dobbs world. It represents what is part of Florida's and many states' playbook to challenge the existence of trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and queer people, for whom privacy equals safety. The DeSantis administration has also banned access to gender-affirming care through Medicaid and for youth. While not every trans, non-binary, gender nonconforming, or queer person seeks such care, access to health care is necessary for every person in America to survive and thrive. Without access to gender-affirming care, the lives of those who depend on it are at stake. Ultimately, DeSantis is attacking individual autonomy, destroying intellectual freedom, and manipulating reality for political gain. He has made both content-based attacks on education as well as institutional attacks, as we are seeing with New College of Florida. DeSantis is rewinding our societal progress to rectify historical wrongs by cultivating Western values and color evasiveness. As we have heard from Dr. Austin, one of those historical wrongs happened here in the state of Florida, as she talked about the Johns Committee that targeted Black faculty and staff at FAMU following the Tallahassee bus boycott in 1957, as well as the NAACP. They accused the NAACP of communist activity and sought to obtain the names of NAACP members. The NAACP resisted, and after a period of back and forth, ultimately received a favorable ruling from the Supreme Court that upheld their right to privacy. After failing with their efforts against the NAACP, the Johns Committee targeted students and educators who were suspected of being queer. While they resisted in the limited ways that they could, at least 15 professors and 50 students left UF as a result of investigations. The UF administration at the time did nothing, and occasionally even performed investigations of suspected queer faculty and students with the university police. It goes without saying that the Johns Committee negatively impacted people's sense of security as well as their livelihoods. That was then, and this here is now. As a white trans person, I've had the privilege to question my role, reject violent systems, resist with Black leadership, and seek liberation. I know that my privilege was afforded to me because of the work of people of color. Marsha P. Johnson, a Black queer person, used her voice and power to scream a path, power, and liberation for all queer folks, but also folks at the intersections of identity. Liberation is about breaking the rigid structures that seek to define our identities and use them for their gain. It is also about coming together and prioritizing liberation for those at the intersections who are most marginalized in order for all of us to be free. And to close, I wanted to quickly thank Morgan and Leaf with Gators for Gender Affirming Care, who helped me prepare my words today. When our communities face opposition and attack from these power structures, it is important to be able to rely on each other when we fight back. When united together, we can truly resist oppression and fight for the future that we all deserve. Thank you.
Okay, so we're just gonna be taking a short break.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Rose. I'm with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and I wanted to know your name and what you study.
My name is Connor, and I am a first-year student studying political science.
Okay, awesome. And then what brings you here to the event today?
Yeah, so I am a first-generation college student, and something that inspired me to pursue a higher education was built on the foundation of an inclusive academic environment. And now that that is being stripped away from me because Ron DeSantis wants to ban diversity, inclusion, and equity programs at our university and other universities across Florida, I feel like it is my purpose and my responsibility to use my voice as a platform to make change.
Absolutely. And then what would you like to see the future of Florida education to look like, or just the future of education here in this country as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's really important that education is welcoming of all communities, regardless of socioeconomic status, background, racial or ethnicities and stuff like that, sexual orientation. We want to ensure that we're promoting inclusive communities that are safe so people are encouraged to learn.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Connor, for coming out here today and, being at this event. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you. Could I speak with you for a moment? I'm actually with the program that is running the teach-in today, Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. I just have a couple of questions for you, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
Okay, it's mainly just about the event today, nothing else. I just wanted to know, no problem, yes, your name and what you study.
Victoria, political science.
Okay, awesome. And what brings you here to the event today?
For the most part, I was just passing through, but also I do know a couple of people that are on the Student Concerns Committee. It's something like that. I just know a couple of people involved, and I wanted to, show my support. So,
Absolutely.
And obviously, I do care about the issues at hand. So.
Yes, and then I wanted to ask if you, if you have an idea or projection of what you hope the future of Florida education will look like.
I hope it will get much more inclusive than it is now, or at least that the inclusivity of it will not be threatened the way it is now. Obviously, it's very concerning to see a lot of the things that are happening and have been happening. I'm a first year, so a lot of these issues were still very prevalent when I was in high school, and it was kind of worrying then to see, even with as little history of, everybody in America, African American history, Native American history, LGBTQ plus history, even with as little of that is taught, they're still trying to limit it. It's very worrying. So I hope to see less of that and maybe a little bit more teaching. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and thank you for being part of this event that Samuel Proctor Oral History Program put on. Thank you.
Tonight at 5 p.m. we have Zohara Simmons coming to speak at an event with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. She was an activist with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and she'll be doing a book signing of her book, State on Freedom. There will be some more information on that later, but we're just going to be passing out flyers. And again, throughout the event, feel free to come up to me or anyone from the spot team who has the shirt right here. But we're just going to be passing these out for anyone who's interested.
Okay, we have our next speaker coming up will be Dr. Hazel Levy in just a few minutes, but we're passing around information. We also have some more wonderful kind of raffle gifts. So I'm going to continue our Black History Month quiz. For a beautiful Marston Science Library mug and a coaster, in 1963, and this is for students only, faculty are not allowed, your faculty are canceled from this competition. In 1963, who was the out gay Black labor organizer who organized the 1963 March on Washington? What was his name? Who was, in 1963, the out gay Black labor organizer? Bayard Rustin. All right, Bayard Rustin is the correct answer. And your name is? Jay-Z. All right, Jay-Z, thank you. Okay, so as the information is going around, here is another Black History Month quiz. Okay. Who is, I'm thinking of a person who is a scholar, activist, who was a member of the Black Panther Party at a certain point, active, also in the Communist Party. Oh my gosh, did I mention the Communist Party? Also a longtime member of the History of Consciousness Department at UC Santa Cruz, and her works have been widely banned in the United States, and she's considered one of the preeminent intellectuals of the 21st century. Who am I thinking of? Students. Okay. Yes. Who is Angela Davis? That is correct. All right. And your name?
Ray.
All right, thank you, Ray. Very cool, okay. Hey, Sophia, help me out here. Save me from I'm just starting to do the history prof ramble.
Okay. So our next speaker will be Dr. Hazel Levy.
Hi there. So I just got these new trifocals, so I'm gonna see if I can do this. But I wear a lot of hats at the University of Florida. I was actually a freshman in the dorms in 90 a while back. And since then I've been a staff here, I've been a faculty, a research scientist, and a graduate student, and then sometimes all three at once, because I am a glutton for the punishment. So let me begin by saying that University of Florida is a home to me. I literally lived here before, and I've seen it change for the good, and sometimes I've seen it regress. So I am just embody UF's history in a lot of ways, and so I'm really grateful to be invited here today by the Sam Proctor and Dr. Ortiz to talk a little bit. So, but then when I was trying on hats today, I was trying to figure out which one did I want to bring, because you can't wear 6 hats. And so today, I want to come to you as a graduate student at the University of Florida. So I have a PhD in biochemistry, but I'm working on a new PhD in higher education administration and policy. And so I've done some research here, and I have to say that I've relied heavily on intersectional theory to just understand and do my work, and actually to help it to make sense to me and find my place in my own work. And so today I kind of want to talk to you about a little bit about my work of combining some aspects of critical race theory with data science. And my goal has basically been to develop and study models for defining how history and historic policies impact conditions today in such things as access to health care and access to educational opportunities. So my goal, I came from a natural sciences background, learning biochemistry, studying cancer genetics, and I've used that scientific practice, if you will, and engineering design process, and have now turned it on my social science, right? And so my goal is to create models that can be tested using quantitative methods and have other people test it as well. I feel like when you create scientific models, the whole idea is to open discussion and debate. The more you help me edit my model, the closer the model becomes to being a robust idea of our reality. So in essence, using data science to study desegregation, to study the impact of redlining, these are just applying some logical mathematical models that are, like I said, invite testing and debate, to be honest. That's how I see it. And so the first project I want to share with you, I'm working with Dr. Ben Skinner at the College of Education, and we are basically looking at historic redlining maps. And I'm going to switch hats and go into professor mode right now. Does anyone know what redlining maps are and who invented them? You don't have to give me the author, but I got some yeses. Does anyone want to shout out and give me some help? Thumbs up, what do you think it is? Thumbs up didn't mean call on me, did it? Redlining maps were maps that were drawn with the guidance from the federal government in the 30s and in the 40s to basically define which regions in metropolitan areas would have access to credit for lending. And the criteria, the indexes, the mathematical models that they used to create these maps included racial indicators for the folks that lived in those spaces. So they wove into this numeric system information about race, and not only that, but they used kind of those classical, those classic white supremacy models for organizing races on an index. They used very similar indices and infused them into those policies for drawing these maps to determine which regions should get credit and which should not. Is that how you understood sunglasses redlining to be? Yes, and so it really framed up metropolitan housing and suburban and urban housing in our metropolitans. And so we worked on this project together, fusing history to see if we couldn't mark policies in history and see how they impact access today. And we chose broadband access because it was during the COVID-19. Everybody needed online access to do their schoolwork. And so using broadband as sort of a model for access to educational spaces, particularly in a COVID-like environment. And what we found was that if you collate all of the metropolitans, for which many of them had redlining maps drawn to them, that access to broadband very closely models those old 1930s maps, with the areas that were graded as being the most risky for lending are also the areas today that have the worst access to broadband. So kind of using quantitative spatial analysis, and then we've been adding this intersectional theory to say, okay, well, if we break this down by the racial characteristics that the census collects, we're sort of held to the data that we're given. Unfortunately, if I was writing the census, I would ask a lot more questions and a lot different questions, but we use the data that we're given. And if we look at race, and then if we look at gender, and lay that on top, does that change who has access in these spaces, right? And then furthermore, our recent study, we've been looking at, okay, so sometimes the census gives us a term like Hispanic. Can we further break Hispanic down into different ethnicities and groups, and then add that layer of the gender that we are given in the data in the census, add those layers on, and do we see the same thing across all Hispanic groups, or do we see differences? And we see quite a lot of difference, actually. So grouping folks into these so it's our way of critiquing race, which is a little bit different than critical race theory. This is critical theories of race, right? We're critiquing these categories that are used to define us and saying, hey, they don't really describe us, or maybe there are other ways we can look at this, all right? So that's one project that I think is, and the redlining paper I think is getting published. We just revised it. So people out there think this scholarship is worth sharing in other states. Another project that I'm really proud of that really came out of my own experiences of being hired into a faculty position and looking around and saying, I don't see any other black women here. Is that possible? Right, just asking the question, is that possible? And I teach science to, I also teach like 5th graders about science too as part of my outreach work. And we say when we're talking about science, we begin with a testable question. Is that a testable question? Have there been others here before? And what is my hypothesis? Yes, there have been, but why don't I see their pictures plastered on the walls at the College of Medicine? You know, that part I didn't really test. But so So by asking this question, I answered it twofold. First, I helped to create an archive of an oral history of black women in medicine that in a collaboration with Sam Proctor. So we have this great archive now of testimonies from people that identified as women, people that identified as black, and their experiences as faculty, research faculty, in the College of Medicine. And let me back up and say, not faculty altogether. I was a research faculty. I was asking specifically not about clinical faculty, but research faculty. It's important to define your parameters. So from that, I got more interested in hiring generally and was able to obtain by public record the entire hiring history of the University of Florida's faculty since 1950. Okay, so we were around before 1950, but the data went back as far as 1950. So now I have the entire hiring data set, which is a pretty big bit of data. So I had to go back to college to figure out how to analyze that data. I had this data set, I sat on it for years because I didn't know what to do. And so enter the new PhD. I'm in a new PhD program. I'm 50 years old. I'm learning how to code in R, and I don't, it's really terrible, but I do it. And thank you. Yeah. It's never too late to start a new career. Don't be afraid. And I'll just wrap up by saying, using robust programs that I did not have access to when I was an undergrad, and that the folks who often we are studying don't have access to these types of programs. So remember, sometimes you're studying a subject. That is a mess. Like, what we really need to do is talk to the people and find out what folks want. So I'll add that in my quantitative study. I'd like to improve on that. But what I found, I wanted to look at Black Thursday and see the impact of student protests on desegregating faculty at the University of Florida. So I looked at those data and found those kids weren't kidding. There were no Black faculty at the University of Florida. They were protesting a zero, right? And then after those protests, we start to see hiring. But what I noticed by doing a finer slice is that often when a new faculty was hired, they created a new department. And so I wanted to look at desegregation of faculty at the department level and create a mathematical model for that. And once again, I had to rely on intersectionality to find that really, if I divide up all the faculty into the folks that were here first, the white male faculty, we'll use the terms that are given in the record, and if I compare them to everyone else, what I find is that white women and everyone else are the slowest to desegregate. So you really have to kind of add that intersectional piece to really see what the desegregation patterns look like. And I notice I don't use the word integration because I will say integration is a really different thing than desegregation, right? And asking permission to do your scholarship, being afraid to get up and talk about your actual science, like I was today, shows that our scholarship is not integrated yet, that it's still being questioned as whether it's welcome or not. So I'll end on that note saying that I like fusing science with my scientific method with my data analysis because I feel like it invites debate and it invites an opportunity to share an experience in creating a model for what we think is happening now and how history has impacted that. All right, so thank you so much.
So our next speaker will be Dr. Cordova, who will just give some background on kind of some of the projects we've been working on. And
thank you. Hello, everyone. So good to see such a packed room. Thrilled to see everyone. Thanks so much for coming out. I'm Dr. Rebekah Cordova. I have been here at UF for about 18 years. So I'm really proud of everything that SPOP has done, continues to do, and a lot of what we do at SPOP is fueled by community engagement, student engagement. We exist because we're in the community and you're with us. So thank you so much for coming out. I'm here to talk mostly about our work with the Reanimating African American Oral Histories in the Gulf South project. But before I talk a little bit about that, I want to spend a couple minutes to discuss why our work, specifically in education, is important. And that's where this project really kind of latches onto. You have this flyer, hopefully. On one side of it, it says Bringing African American History to K-12 Classrooms. Please, please, please come out. Obviously, come out to both of these events. But this event on March 21st is going to expand upon a little bit about what I'm going to talk about now. So if you're interested in education, in schooling, African American history, why it's so important that we don't, budge on having African American history in schooling, please come out to our March 21st public program. So we have one program that we have at SPOP is Reanimating African American Oral Histories of the Gulf South. This is a project funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. We received hundreds of thousands of dollars in a very, very prestigious award a year and a half ago. This award was granted to just a few universities for the full amount. UF was thrilled when we received this award. Tons of media, tons of articles, tons of events and spotlights, because this was such a prestigious award for us to get, right? So this particular award does two things. It asks us as faculty and staff and students to do two things. One, it asks us to create curriculum that pulls from the oral histories that we have archived. These oral histories, of course, are very rich in African American history and storytelling, narratives. It's an incredible resource, but oftentimes it doesn't reach the community here in Florida or even nationwide. So one thing that this grant has us doing is creating curriculum so that teachers in K through 12 schools can use our oral histories to teach African American history in their classroom. So it's a wonderful, wonderful resource for educators and the community at large. The second thing that it has us do is work with the linguistics department in our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. The linguistics department is creating an artificial intelligence program that will better be able to transcribe oral histories and pay attention to African American language features. So if you've ever heard or been part of a transcription process, it's like many other things. It has been coded basically to not honor African American language or any type of linguistic features of marginalized populations. So the linguistics department is coding and creating a program in order to better honor features of African American language so that our oral histories are transcribed accurately. So these are two really large endeavors that UF was very, very excited to start. But as political impacts continue forward, the work that we're doing gets more and more under a microscope, right? There are more and more questions about the curriculum we're going to be creating and having put into classrooms around African American history. There's more and more questions about what types of indoctrination these pieces of curriculum will do and be. Anything that mentions racism or anything that mentions systems of inequality historically are questioned. So it's increasingly important for people like yourselves who are invested in keeping accurate history, challenging to racism and white supremacy alive in our communities, to make sure to support the programs here at UF that are doing this incredible work, that we, by the nature and design of our work, are pushing back against these systems of oppression. I'm an education scholar and have been for several years. I work all over the country providing anti-racism professional development for teachers. We must continue this work because we're still at the point where 80% of our K through 12 teachers are white women. And our schools are increasingly more and more diverse, and we must continue to support young people in schools. And that means being honest about white supremacy and racism and other systems of oppression that we need them to tackle as they get older. So our project, please come out to support our project on March 21st. We need to show UF that the projects that they were so excited about just a few years ago, they can still be excited about. They can still support our work. They can still support scholarship. It is in university settings that we must fight for this freedom to know and do the right thing for justice, for liberation. Even though we're a state university, this is the place that calls upon your actions to support your own education and our work as scholars. So if you're interested in education or the roles that African American history play in the classroom or curriculum or racism in K through 12 schools, I encourage you again, come out to March 21st. If you're curious about the program, that project around the oral history curriculum and the linguistics software around African American language, please come and talk to me about it. You can get on this website that's not here anymore, but find out, we have a whole page on our website talking about this project, and I would love to talk more about it. So thank you so much for coming here. Really, really appreciate you as students, faculty, and staff for supporting our work at SPOP. Sorry, who should be next? Sorry, I didn't know who should be next, I'm sorry. Oh, no, it's okay.
Next person's on Zoom, right?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I'm getting that set up.
But we were thinking while y'all set up, we can go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so do y'all want to come up here? So following off of the NEH grant that Dr. Cordova was talking about, we're just going to talk about a few other projects that are going on at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program that are working to protect African American studies and expand it and expand our history collection. So first, Krystin and Ronan are going to talk about the Mississippi Freedom Project.
Yeah. Who wants to start? Hi everyone, my name is Krystin. So I'm just here to tell you about one of the projects we have at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, which is the Mississippi Freedom Project. So this is a summer fieldwork trip that both of us and a couple other people in this room got to go on this past summer. It has been going every year since 2008, I believe. And it's a trip where we go through the Mississippi River Delta and follow the stories and collect oral histories and learn from the people who have experienced different things, the descendants of different issues. We go to multiple cities. We go through Mississippi. We went to Glendora and Money, which is where Emmett Till's family's from and where that story took place. So we get to see those places and be there, feel it, talk to the community, talk to the mayor there, who has been the mayor there for a very long time. We got to go to Holly Springs and talk to some of the organizers of the Freedom Rides, different organizations like the Mississippi Roots and Wings, Immigrants' Rights Alliance, all kinds of issues in multiple cities. And yeah, it's a very meaningful fieldwork trip, and all of our collections are also publicly available online. You can find them at the SPOP website. You can find them on the UF Digital Collections, and the interviews can be used for anything that you find them relevant for. So we had people go for issues from health disparities, talking about how some of these neighborhoods are in food desert. We had people go for political science, talking about the way that people organize, the different ways that they made action. We have people for immigrants' rights, for linguistics, talking about some of the different linguistic features between African-American vernacular English with the people who are telling the stories. So any type of interest that you have, there's probably a way that the Mississippi Freedom Project can help you look at that interest and a way that those interviews could be useful to you. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I got my start at the oral history program when I went on the Mississippi Freedom Project trip back in 2021. And I'm kind of biased, but I would say it's sort of the crown jewel of what we do at SPOP. I mean, I liked it so much I got a job with SPOP after I went on that trip. Yeah, and Krystin, common pattern. But it's hard to overstate how transformative it is. And I'll say the applications for going on this year's will be opening soon. You know, follow SPOP on social media and everything, and you'll see about that. But it is really transformative. Like Krystin was talking about in Glendora, Mississippi, where Emmett Till was before he was murdered, the community there has a museum that they run solely on their own, especially with the mayor, Johnny Thomas. Sorry? And just seeing the way that these tiny towns of like barely 100 people still manage to highlight their own history, and the way that this history that they're highlighting was critical to American history in the 60s and the civil rights movement. And you actually, you can learn about that stuff, but it's completely different to go there and see it and see the descendants of those people who are involved in that, not just honoring the memory of their ancestors who did this work in the 60s, but keeping it going, not just in Glendora, but in Jackson, Mississippi, where we met with the Mississippi Immigrants' Rights Alliance, the lawyers there who keep that ethos going, that spirit going. In Elaine, Arkansas, where in 100 or so years ago there was a racial massacre that's nearly covered up and completely ignored, but the people there in this tiny town have a community museum center where they keep that memory alive and are always trying to put that history into the public consciousness, which is, exactly what we're talking about here. That's exactly what Black Studies is about in African American history. So the Mississippi Freedom Project is really incredible part of that, and how we at the oral history program try and get that in. And you should go on it if you can. Patrick, do you want to say anything about the Mississippi Freedom Project? Patrick also went last year. You don't have to. Sure. Yeah, come on.
Hello, thank you all for coming here. Wait, first of all, let's please give a round of applause to Ms. Deborah Hendricks over here because she's really helping us out. As well as to all the other faculty and staff, thank you so much for coming. I think the best part of MFP, the Mississippi Freedom Project, is that not only do we just go into these communities and ask their own stories and their own history, but we also get to revitalize their communities. And we don't just, it's not just taking, we contribute. And I think that's the best part about it. So please come up if you are interested in just asking us about it. So.
All right, so up next, we have a guest joining us on Zoom, all the way from USF. So as we all know, probably, this was a statewide walkout, and then here at UF, this teach-in so that we could discuss all of these issues that you're here to discuss. So Ben is the student leader of Stand for Freedom, or Students for Freedom, which led the walkout today. So he's just gonna hop on Zoom and give us an update on how the walkout went statewide and for him at USF. So get him set up.
While we're fixing some tech issues, does anyone else want to come up and say a few words? Okay, perfect. So,
While we're working on those tech issues, we're going to do another book giveaway. So put on your history thinking caps. And apropos of our brilliant students who just shared about our Mississippi Freedom Project summer field trip, I want us to dial down into the Mississippi Delta in the early 1960s. And the murder of Emmett Till was something that catalyzed a whole generation of people your age and younger to become activists and organizers in the civil rights movement. And we have the testimony of people like John Lewis, Bob Moses, of Angela Davis, who talked about how devastated they were when they first heard about the torture and murder of Emmett Till in Mississippi. And then many of them came to Mississippi to try to change things in the early 60s. So the quiz is for students for a signed copy of an African American and Latinx history. I had to look at the title of my own book. I mean, you're turning 59 in a couple weeks, Dr. Austin, and so it's amazing how much you forget. So, for the next signed copy of the book, what was the lead student organization that organized Mississippi Freedom Summer in 1964? What was the name of that student organization, composed of students the age of our students now, high school and college? What was the name of that organization? Yes. It was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And your name is? Sinevi. Okay, you winner. All right, like magic, our technical issues have been.
Yes, so now we're going to hear from Ben Braver.
So it's been amazing because there are 1 million college students in this state, 3.9 million students in this state who all care about having diversity in our education and freedom of our education, right? Right now, I'm with our USF organizers, Steph Devlinger.
Devlinger, yeah.
Yes, and Jonathan Chavez. Hi. Also one of our state organizers, Kat Margot.
Hi.
I said that right? Yeah. Okay. And they just pulled off an amazing rally. Hundreds of people, professors, we had ABC, we had Washington Post. We have so many people interested in this because y'all are working to stand for freedom, right? Because that's our basic values. We care about diversity in thought and freedom of education. And students around the state care too. And they showed up today to show that. If you look at our Instagram, Stand for Freedom FL, you can see so many pictures and videos of people like us around the state standing up for what we believe in. Is there anything else you want to know? Anything you want to know from Steph and Jonathan?
Yeah, can you give us the update on some of the other schools as well? Or how many people signed up?
Oh, so signed up, well over 1,000, but we know there's so many more than that who are at these walkouts.
We know, so as Ben said, we easily had a couple hundred students here, at least 200, I would say. Judging from the videos I got from our St. Pete campus, our USF St. Pete campus, at least 100 students there. The UCF walkout today, which is great because actually the UCF main day, as far as I know, is supposed to be tomorrow with their board of trustees, but it looks like they polled at least 50 students. And there was a few more videos I saw from Cat, but it looks like turnout in every school that there was organization was very strong today, very strong.
It's been so inspiring to see all the students who care and who are diligently and passionately working to protect the rights that have been fought for, the ones that have been won, and those that are at stake right now. Did I give anything else?
No, I think that about covers it.
Okay.
Not sure what else I would say.
Awesome. All right. And Ben, can you tell us about what you guys are going to continue to work on now that you've done your walkout today?
So on the 28th, we're going down to New College to protest with them because we need to stop that kind of attack while it's still a relative leak and not a full flood, right? It's terrible when any college becomes overrun with a political ideology that's mandated from the state, right? As we're going down there to show that today we show that the entire state is scared and is willing to stand up for our rights. And on the 28th, we go down there and say, this is where it needs to stop, where it needs to be reversed, and where we need to move forward. One way they're also moving forward to protect our rights is to introduce students and teachers' bills of rights in the Florida legislature. We believe that these are things that these are the basic values of education that anybody who values education will agree with and will sign on to. Stuff like teachers should have the freedom to teach and students the freedom to learn. The teachers deserve to teach without influence from political actors, and teachers deserve to learn a comprehensive education. Jonathan has some other amazing demands that USF specifically have.
Yeah, so with our walkout today, we had a mission statement so that we could articulate a few demands. They're pretty actionable items, although unfortunately not stuff that we really expect to have. Just so I can give them to you accurately, give me a moment. I'll pull up the list that we had here. Give me just a moment. All right, so they were mostly related to the governor, specific asks of him. So we demanded that Governor DeSantis publicly walk back his commitments to outlaw DEI funding, that he publicly walk back his commitments, that he publicly commit to improve instead of abolishing DEI programs, that he publicly commits to support academic independence, the independence of all the schools, that he publicly commits to supporting tenure, and finally that all of our local state senators and representatives commit to voting no to any legislation that comes down that includes any of those items that we have asked DeSantis to not vote for. So again, pretty specific stuff, fairly actionable stuff. Unfortunately, the requests of DeSantis, we don't expect those to be met, but they are pretty clear and they are great, straightforward things for us to say, hey, listen, if he is not working with us on this, we asked him, we're going to be out again asking the same stuff in the future.
Because what we value is freedom and education, what everybody values. If he comes out as not valuing that, that's scary. We should be able to agree that we care about freedom of, and that we agree in the freedom of individuals, and that we should enshrine people's rights into our law to lay down a line the government must never cross.
All right, thank you so much, Ben, and the team from USF. Appreciate it. Yes. So our check-in from USF. Thank you guys so much. And thank you all for your patience as we dealt with the Zoom of that.
So Krystin and I, really quickly, are going to give a quick overview of some things that are going on in terms of student activist groups or just student organizing at the University of Florida. That's been going on for a long time, not just recently with everything that's happening in education. So kind of early in 2022, a lot of Black students here, there are certain faculty members, Black staff, faculty, and professors who we often go to, who we see ourselves in, and just spend a lot of time with. And those are people who really support us, who we know always have our back here at UF. And so in early 2022, we kind of noticed a lot of these people were leaving, and we weren't really sure why. We noticed, you know, our Vice President of Student Life, Dr. Mole left, Dr. Atkins left, Reggie Lane left. I know all of you might not know those people, but those are people who were extremely central in our community here and who supported so many students at UF and our mentors in a lot of our lives. And so we kind of noticed a lot of those people were leaving. A lot of Black faculty, staff, and professors in general were kind of leaving the university, as well as Black student enrollment. When Krystin was here, you said it was
when I started here, it was a little over 8%, and now it is going down about 5%.
Yeah, so our Black student enrollment is dropping. Generally, the Black population at UF is dropping, and so we kind of noticed that and just wanted to try and do some research to figure out why that was, and then try and take action and change whatever was driving people away. And so we started.
So the two of us and a group of many other students, most of whom are in the room today, so thank you guys for being here, are working on what we're calling the Student Concerns Coordinating Committee. Basically just a group of people who is not only keeping track of history and being willing to learn these things in our background and go through this task force report that was mentioned and all the other resources that are available to us, but use these histories and data and facts to fight for what the students' concerns are. So, yeah.
And just to expand a little bit on that, part of our motivation for this was that we noticed we do have a student government, but it's not always representative of all of us. You know, that's going to happen with any government. There are just a lot of issues within politics, and so we are always represented by our student government, as well as there are a lot of different student orgs on campus of different student leaders. We have the Black Student Union, we have the Hispanic Student Union, we have a bunch of organizations like that, but there's not really a place where they can all come together and make change, and when they see a problem, act on it together. And so that is what we want this committee to be, and we don't want it to just be something that just happens in 2023 in response to the legislation happening now, but we want it to be a long-term thing where students can consistently have a place to meet, a place to organize. So when I was mentioning group chats earlier and people coming up to talk to us, if that's a committee that you're interested in being a part of, we're also calling it, Krystin came up with the name SC3, just to kind of keep it short, Student Concerns Coordinating Committee. So if anyone is interested in being a part of that, joining the group chat, and just long-term or even short-term being a part of the work that we do together, please come talk to me or Krystin after.
Yes. And if you're involved with any student organizations at all, any groups, any identities, we really want to work with everyone. So you don't have to particularly be one of the people who wants to represent the SC3, but if you're interested in collaborating, in sharing or posting our flyers or any of the things that we're doing, and just collaborating with each other, telling us what the issues are that you want to see happen. When we start having these meetings with administration, telling us what you want to be said in those meetings, anything like that. So You don't have to be, willing to be that person on the front line to join or put your name out there, but we definitely want to hear from everyone and want to get the changes made that you'd like to be made. So please come and talk to me and Sophia and get in contact with us about SC3. Oh, she had a question.
Does someone have a question? Do you want the mic? Not yet, but if you want to come talk to us after, we'll make sure we'll keep you posted when we have one, Yes. So now we're going to hear from some more professors who are going to introduce themselves. Yes, they're going to introduce themselves.
Okay, so just to remind folks, if you just joined us, just to kind of tell you the title of the teach-in today, Can't Ban Us, Day of Action, Black History Teach-ins in Florida and Beyond. And the genesis for this is students and staff at the University of Florida who approached us at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program and have said, African American studies is being banned. There are over 20 scholars who are now banned from the AP African American Studies curriculum. There's an effort to try to stop diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's attack on the rights and the dignity of trans people in the state of Florida. There's an attack on the human rights of people all over the state of Florida. And so what can we do? And as historians at the Oral History Program, we said, well, look, this is Black History Month. Why would the state of Florida attack Black studies in the middle of Black History Month? Is that a coincidence? No, it is not a coincidence. It's in your face. But see, the state of Florida thought that we would just let it go. You just heard from an organizer from Central Florida who said hundreds and maybe even thousands of students just from Central Florida walked out today. North Florida, South Florida, California, New York. We've heard from organizers in Pittsburgh who have engaged in walkouts in solidarity of the struggles that we are having here. So before I introduce our next distinguished speaker, I want to do another book giveaway, which is going to highlight the importance of Black studies in the arts and in poetry, and also it's going to get us to the oral history collection here that Dr. Cordova was talking about. A lot of people don't know that University of Florida has one of the nation's best oral history archives in African American oral history. People come here from all over the world to study Black history and Black studies. So when the state of Florida tries to ban Black studies, we tell the state of Florida, you can't do that. We're not going to give you the power to do that, are we? No, we're not. So I'm going to start reading a poem, and this is for the next book giveaway, signed copy of African American Latinx History of the United States. And I'm going to start reading the poem. The poem means a lot to me where I grew up. I'm a first-generation college student. No one ever talked to us about going to college where I grew up. I grew up in a shipyard town. We went into the military. We went into the yard. We went into Korea, to Vietnam. I went to Central America in the mid-'80s. We didn't go to college. So I'll never forget the first time I heard this poem. It meant so much to me, and right away, the people in my neighborhood connected to it. So I'm going to start reading it, and if you can identify the poem, just raise your hand. And this time I'm going to open it to faculty and students. Right? We've been discriminating against faculty earlier. We've been saying you can't, right? Okay. So, and we'll give away 2 books. But tell me if you can recognize the poem and the author of the poem. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong. It learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. Tupac, you got it. And your name is? Gabrielle, okay, Gabrielle. I had to ask Sophia earlier, I said, do people still listen to Tupac? I just want to make sure, because I'm a little behind. Anyway, So it gives me great pleasure, such a great honor to introduce to you one of the great legal scholars in the United States of America, who, beyond his scholarship, has always been there for the faculty, the students, and the staff of this university anytime there's been an important human rights, civil rights struggle. So please join me in welcoming Professor Kenneth Nunn.
Paul, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Professor Cole, thank you. Glad you're here. Glad everybody's here. This is so fantastic. I love this. This is taking me back to the 1960s. As you can see, I'm old, okay? But I came up here to talk to you guys a little bit about what's going on, and I saw this thing in the new books, and I said, queer ducks, they're gonna ban this book. I'm surprised they have this book here, but it's a great thing. That's why we're here, so that people can come to the library to get the books they want to get and read what they want to read without having the heavy hand of government censorship to tell you what you can read and what you can't read. So that's just a, kind of a on the fly kind of conversation, because I just saw that. I just walked up here to see that. I'm glad Callie's here because he's going to sing with me a little bit later on. All right, Sankofa. Y'all have to say that back. Sankofa. Sankofa. All right, what do we want? We want freedom. So when I say what do we want, you're going to say freedom. Okay, I thought this was going to be outside, so, What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Freedom. When do we want it? Now. We want freedom to learn. We want freedom to teach. We want freedom to live our lives the way we want to live our lives. That's why we're here, because we're in a moment now where freedom, our academic freedom, our learning freedom, our teaching freedom is being challenged. Okay, so Sankofa. 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 Do any of you know what Sankofa means? I know you do, because I know some of you, okay? But Sankofa means history. In a nutshell, it means history. It means going back to get information that's useful to you. And it comes from a word that's a Akan word from Ghana that was so significant in African culture that they said, we're gonna make a symbol of that because it's important and we want people to take that concept to heart. Sankofa, it's a bird that's reaching back and touching its feathers. It's a bird that's there because everybody wants to know, they want you to know, just from looking at the symbol, how important it is to remember your history, to remember where you came from. And that's a natural thing. That's a universal thing. That's something that every culture in this society knows history is important. It's important in the United States of America and Western culture because we have things like the University of Florida where people go specifically to study history. So when we're saying we can't study African American history or we can't study Black history, what we're saying is that a most fundamental principle of human reality, we're going to take that away. We're not going to allow you to learn about Black people. You can learn about all kinds of things. You can learn about queer ducks. But we're not going to allow you to learn Black history. What kind of craziness is that? Okay? How can politicians somewhere take something away from you when they are not you? They don't have the right to speak for you. They don't have the right to guide you in a particular direction or not. It's up to you. I went to a great program last night. It was a town hall for the African American Studies Department. And really the best line I got out of that was the director, Professor Dr. Cant, said, we're not here to indoctrinate people. It's not like you have to know these things or you have to remember this or you have to believe this. We're giving you a smorgasbord of ideas, and we want you to pick and choose from them the things that matter to you. And that's what's important. So we're living in a moment now where people want to stop African American history. They want to stop diversity, equity, and inclusion. They want to stop critical race theory. Let me tell you something. These things are dog whistles. They do not care specifically about African American history, critical race theory, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are all dog whistles. They can't even spell CRT, let alone define what it is. Now, I've taught that for over 20 years, okay? I know what it is. I can tell you what it is, but the bottom line is these people don't know what it is. But they don't care what it is because it's a placeholder. It doesn't matter. It could be critical race theory today, it could be black power tomorrow, it could be whatever. The bottom line is that they don't need to understand and research things meaningful to them in their lives because they've decided that those things are not meaningful to them in their lives. That's basically what we're talking about. It's scary, it's dangerous, and the people who want to study those things need to be controlled. That's basically what they're talking about. Has nothing to do with facts, has nothing to do with learning, has nothing to do with having a smorgasbord in the so-called marketplace of ideas for you to select from, for you to take the things that matter to you. It has nothing to do with that. This is a political movement that people have been sitting around waiting for. This is not the first time. All this stuff was happening when my ancient behind was sitting in chairs like the ones you're sitting in now. God, I hate to think how long it was, maybe 40 years ago. Okay, they were doing the same thing then. Oh no, you can't have affirmative action. You can't teach about that. No, you can't have a Black Studies department. No, you can't have a Martin Luther King holiday. No, you can't say we have in opposition to apartheid. There's always movements and struggles that people are engaged in to try to make the world a better place, because without you, the world would not be a better place. It takes you, your effort, your struggle, your commitment to make it a better place. And because of your effort, your struggle, your commitment, people like me of African descent were able to teach at your state university, which was not true 50 years ago. Barely true 32 years ago when I came to University of Florida. You're able to sit here in a room with all of the diversity in this room, okay? It couldn't have happened. It wasn't like some politician woke up someday and said, you know what, it would be a great idea if we integrated the University of Florida. I'm gonna pass a bill to make that happen. It didn't happen like that, folks. It happened because unknown soldiers like you got up and made it happen. When they wanted to start an African American studies program here, that just didn't happen. There were sit-ins. There were people who were kicked off this campus. There were people who, who struggled for that, who started saying, we'll just go over to IBC and start teaching our own. So this stuff is all the result of struggle, basically. That's the point. We have to get to that and get it done. Now, I'm going to say something as a recently retired person who is free to speak their mind. And what I'm going to say is that I'm very disappointed in my colleagues who are administrators here at the University of Florida. I'm embarrassed and ashamed of them because they should have said something. It shouldn't be on you to protect freedom of speech and academic freedom at the great University of Florida. The president should have been protecting freedom of speech and academic freedom at the University of Florida. He should have said, over my dead body. He has enough money that he's comfortable for the rest of his life, or at least the former outgoing president, okay? He would have been fine to say, well, you know, you're gonna do that, I'm gonna walk away. He could have done that. Your deans could have done that. Your provost could have done that. Your vice presidents could have done that. And the ones that are quiet are the ones that are running now because they're coming after their DEI stuff. There's a whole lot of people gonna lose jobs. They didn't say nothing, okay? Now, what about that? I'm a lawyer, and I'm looking at all this. I've got a civil rights background. I'm looking at all this, and I'm saying, you know, there's some lawsuits gonna happen. I hope they really like not having diversity, equity, and inclusion, because some people are gonna be suing. You told me I could come here and work here and have a job, and you promised me, you searched for me throughout the nation to come here to do DEI work, and you fired me because some crazy person in Tallahassee got a big head? Oh, I'm gonna sue you. You know, I think the lawsuits are coming. I'm surprised, I'm disappointed in our Justice Department for a lot of reasons right now. But it seems to me that there are all kind of federal laws that say that you can't discriminate against people that are being broken willy-nilly in the state of Florida. And I ain't seen no Justice Department team come down here with lawyers. They're scared the hell out of you when they do it. I remember being at Stanford University when it wasn't the Justice Department, it was the Department of Ed. They got a whole team of lawyers come down and they'll look at, well, is there like is there a culture of oppression that's happening here? And they'll start pulling out books and they have to respond to things and jump at stuff. Where is it? We had some federal intervention, some federal interest when they were talking about not allowing people to be expert witnesses in cases last year. But a whole lot of stuff has rolled down since then. Where is our federal government? Okay? When you take people, when you do things and you tell people, I know this for a fact because last year I was on the hiring committee at the law school. We've lost probably about 6, including myself, African-American law professors at the law school. And we've had a devil of a time trying to replace them. Why? Because a black person don't want to come to Florida right now. Particularly when the leading area of academic inquiry for African Americans who are teaching law is critical race theory. There's a big sign out on the state of Florida that's on I-10 that says if you black, stay out. If you teach African American studies, stay out. If you teach critical race theory, stay out. And folks are not coming. And your education is being impacted by that. Your education. There are people who are prosecutors today here in Gainesville, in Tallahassee, in Panama City, in Miami, in Orlando, okay, who are former students of mine in small towns, big cities, all throughout the state, who I dare say have a better understanding of the mass incarceration and the school to prison pipeline and all of these topics that I would teach than they would have had if I wasn't here. It's important. We need to get some federal involvement on all of that stuff, okay? So I'm not gonna talk about, I'm gonna skip my critical race theory stuff, okay? And this is where I start singing, okay? You ready? All right. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, walking up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let DeSantis turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let DeSantis turn me around. Keep on learning, keep on teaching, teaching up the freedom land. Thank you guys, love you. Sankofa. Fantastic.
Thank you. So we'll now have Dr. Aida Hozic.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's very difficult to follow up now. And I'm deeply, deeply, deeply honored to be here. Thank you all for coming. You will forgive me if I read, because I haven't done teach-ins in a while. So I'll try to kind of look at my notes and refresh my memory on what I jotted down over the last few days since Paul asked me to speak. I also want just to say, as a qualifier, I'm here because Black studies matter to all of us. I'm here because I come from a country. I come from the former Yugoslavia, which fell apart, and where actually genocide took place. Because I think people whitewashed history, and I'm using this word intentionally, for too long there. And then once they ended up with violence and with a war, they continued to play with history and write revisionist histories, using it on purpose to kind of justify authoritarianism, lack of freedoms, and suppression of others. So what's happening here and what's happening with Black studies and the threats to our education resonate with me very personally, because I can see where this might end, okay? What seems now as an attack on classroom curricula can actually lead to much greater and much more dangerous politics and violence. I also happen to teach a class on race and international politics called The Color Line. And so one of the things that I wanted to say now today is kind of the list of things that I have here is why Black studies matter for our understanding of international politics and why this is not only a black and white issue here in the United States. So let me start first by saying that race is a fiction, okay? It's an invention of European encounters with the New World and of the subsequent colonialism and imperialism. But it now, as some of my colleagues would argue, it acts as a structure, okay? It's an ordering principle in international politics, once upon a time known as the standard of civilization. As I often tell my students, race does not produce racism, okay? It's not because we are different, because we have different colors, that we end up having racism. On the contrary, it's the other way around. Racism, as a process of domination, is the one that produces race. It produces difference so that global power hierarchies, which organize our lives, could be more easily justified, naturalized, and rendered invisible. Okay? So that's point one. Point two, as a colleague of mine from the University of Pennsylvania, Bob Vitalis, has very painstakingly documented, race and racism are at the very origin of the discipline of international relations, which I teach and which some of you study. The journal Foreign Affairs, which is one of the premier publication outlets of the Washington's foreign policy establishment, was once upon a time named Journal of Interracial Relations. International politics was understood to be administration of colonial possessions. It was an urgent kind of, oh, yes, I'm sorry. Now I'm realizing you can't really hear me. So international politics was at the time understood as administration of colonial possessions, as the control over people who were colonial subjects. It was also an urgent policy matter here in the United States because it actually addressed North-South relations in the immediate post-Civil War period. So the distinction between domestic and foreign, international, and once again, kind of local politics was not very clearly understood. But what was understood was that foreign meant governing other people, black people, and that those people could be rebellious, uppity, and that they could feel as if they're entitled to the same rights. So interracial then, as now, I think, implied foreign affairs only insofar as it entailed and kind of meant domination of those who are different. The third point, why does it matter? It's because black and colored people were the founding figures of the discipline of international relations, and because their scholarship has profoundly changed it and shaped it. So W.E.B. Du Bois, Alain Locke, Mersey Tate, Ralph Bunche here in the United States were really kind of the creators of what international politics meant throughout the 20th century. Outside of the United States, Frantz Fanon, Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Kwame Nkrumah, Amilcar Cabral did the exact same things. In the period of decolonization, from the 1950s until the 1970s, it was these leaders and major public intellectuals who were engaged in the project of not just simply national liberation from colonial powers, but in the radical reimagining of the international order through non-aligned movement and the creation of the new international economic order. That we have now forgotten this history, much like the history of the Haitian Revolution and its impact on world politics, limits our understanding of possibilities for refashioning the world politics. Fourth point, black diaspora, constituted through violence and migration, has always pulsated with just such possibilities for radical reimagining of the world. There is a rich history of internationalism carried forward by black artists and activists, by traders and by church leaders, across continents and across national borders. Garvism and Rastafarianism, as we recently heard here at UF in lectures by scholars Adam Getachew and Robbie Shilliam, carried within themselves alternate cosmologies and imaginings of relations that would work against violence and oppression in myriad ways, through music, through festivals, through performances, through economic relations, and through solidarities. Point 5, global inequalities continue to be written in racial terms. The current global realignments, as we can see, differ dramatically in their treatment of wars, violent and natural disasters in different parts of the world. And yet another proof of how deeply racialized our approach to international politics continues to be. Let me be clear. This is not the fault of people who are dying or being displaced in different spots in the world. And we should restrain ourselves from recreating hierarchies of victimhood, which is what these great powers wish us to do precisely. But we should also not ask those who are currently being victimized and being helped to get less help because they are being temporarily privileged. But we should continue to advocate that, for instance, all refugees and all displaced people around the world receive the same help as they need it. Finally, and this really brings us back here home to Florida, I think we should be very cognizant that any attacks on black studies are not merely issues of culture wars, of identity politics, of something that's kind of superstructure and less relevant to political life, just something that basically is used by the politicians to rally their base. It's not detached. These attacks are not detached from the material conditions in which people of color work and live. If we are limiting the study of black history, politics, and culture, then we are limiting admission policies at this university. We are limiting the curricula, social life, and fabric of educational institutions, but at the same time, we are then making them unhospitable for all people of color. Okay? This does not, once again, this exceeds just the black and white issue. We're making these universities then less hospitable to anyone of color, okay? Given how deeply imbricated black history is with global history. This means also that by denying admissions, by denying classes, and the kind of banning classes in high schools, we are also then limiting future career opportunities to people of color everywhere. So to conclude, By decimating Black studies, we are diminishing our own history, but we are also foreclosing possibilities for any more meaningful and more just future to everyone. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Professor Hozic. So next up, we're going to have a community member and leader, Mr. Kali Blount.
Thank you. Thank you. I just spent the morning at the school board reviewing proposed materials for social studies that they may adopt. I only looked at 6 books, so I only came up with 6 pages of omissions. But history is important. Who makes history? Anybody? People do. Which people make history? Anybody know? Huh? Watch it, son. I'm not done. All people make history. So when you suppress somebody's history, you are diminishing or denying their humanity. And for black people in this country, we've seen that before. That was one of the main rationalizations for chattel slavery, that we were less people, less than other people. And we're not going back. So I may end up, after all this has gone on a while, thanking Governor DeSantis. Oh, excuse me, I mean DeSantis. Because if you all react correctly, it may turn to our benefit. See, what you should do, since he wants to suppress that history, go and get that history. Read Africa, Mother of Western Civilization by Yosef Ben Yochanan. Read They Came Before Columbus by Ivan Van Sertima. Read Plan to Planet by Haki Madhubuti. See, and make sure you make 10 other people do the same. So if we can create a positive backlash of going and getting this history, he may end up doing us some benefit after all, because that's the important piece, is to go and get that history. And Brother Dr. Nunn, I want to add one more thing to what he mentioned. Come downtown on Juneteenth and see the Sankofa statue unveiled, where the old Joe Confederate statue stood for 115 years. And you're going to see that bird reaching to its back, but it reaches for an egg on its back. And that egg symbolizes that you will birth the future out of what you go back to bring forward. History is your repertoire. If I had all the talent of the greatest opera singer, I got knocked on the head and forgot everything, I would still have the voice, but I wouldn't know what to do with it. So history is your guide. It shows you what you're capable of. It also shows you what tragic errors not to repeat. So I think this governor who wants to use fear and hate for political power, he's just picking on anybody that he can make a big noise about. He'll attack anything that can spark up the fear and hate of a country that has not vindicated its history. And if we don't vindicate this country's history, it's going down. So, pick which side you want and work, do the work to counteract what he's doing.
Thank you, Brother Kali. Another round of applause for Mr. Blount. So we are really blessed at the University of Florida and in Gainesville to have such an incredible community of African descent scholars like Kali, and many of us know Mrs. Vivian Filer at the Cotton Club Museum. Many of us are familiar with the Lincolnville Museum in St. Augustine that was created out of the old Excelsior High School. In Pensacola, the oral history program has worked with Commissioner Taniata Broughton, who's working on a Black History Museum in Pensacola. So Black history is spreading everywhere. Black studies is spreading everywhere, and the state of Florida is trying to stop it because it knows that eventually it's on the losing side. It's on the losing side when it tries to stop diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, the last two presentations gave me a good book raffle quiz to share with you. So we have another book, signed copy of the book People Power, that I co-wrote with Wesley Hogan, who's one of the great scholars of the civil rights movement. So the question I have, and I want to preface this quiz question with just so much thanks for the colleagues and the staff that made this event possible and that are hosting this event. And I want us to get ready to give them a big shout out and a big round of applause. But I want to preface that by saying that a lot of people aren't aware that the University of Florida has the best library staff in the United States of America, right? And I say that because I first came here not as a faculty member. I did arrive here as a faculty member in 2008. I'm very blessed to be in the Department of History. I'm very blessed to be an affiliate faculty in African American Studies, Gender and Women's Studies, the Center for Latin American Studies, Bob Graham Center. It's just an incredible privilege to be here to be able to work with you, especially as students. But I first arrived here in the mid-1990s as an anonymous graduate student from Duke University. No one knew who I was. I hadn't written all these books yet. But the library staff here, and I was sharing earlier with the library staff at Marston, just adopted me. And one of the key pieces of evidence I needed in my dissertation on African American history in Florida was access to the Sanborn fire insurance maps. And these maps taught me how redlining occurred. They gave me the data that I needed to understand how the insurance industry in New York colluded with the state of Florida, the city government of Gainesville, to prevent African Americans from getting the credit they needed to become homeowners, to get a leg up in life. And so when we talk about the black-white wealth income disparities a lot of folks talk about now, it was capitalism, states, city governments that colluded to keep black people poor. But to prove that was happening in the 1920s, as a grad student in the 1990s, I needed to look at those fire insurance maps to see how the process worked. And so I came here to Marston Science Library. A few weeks ago, when we were talking about the crisis of facing black studies because of the Florida's ban on advanced placement African American studies curriculum, again, the librarians stepped up on this campus and have opened this wonderful space to us to have our Black Studies teach in. So I want us to give a great shout out and round of applause to our staff at the Marston Science Library. Now, the Black Studies quiz to get a signed copy of the book People Power is also a library-based quiz, dear library colleagues. So I'm thinking of a person, a great Puerto Rican scholar. This is also a question involving intersectionality. A great Puerto Rican scholar who moves to New York early in the 20th century, and he becomes an indefatigable librarian and archivist of Black studies. And he commits his life to collecting, to preserving, and archiving Black history. And he spends decades doing it. And generations of scholars, including myself, have benefited tremendously from this great Afro-Puerto Rican scholar. I'm thinking of his name right now. Can anyone, and he actually, here's another clue. He has a library named after him in Harlem. Can anyone tell me the name of the person I'm thinking of now? Originally from Puerto Rico, moved to New York, a pioneer in Black studies, archival collections, and scholarship. Uh-oh. You're correct. It is Arturo Schomburg.
Schomburg is a Puerto Rican?
Yes. Demonstrating the connections, the Black diaspora that Professor Nunn and Professor Hozic talked about. Arturo Schomburg, a great Puerto Rican scholar, but without his incredible work in collecting literally thousands of cubic feet of material on African American history, we wouldn't be able to do what we are doing today. So looking at the run of show, our choice is for me to talk for 30 minutes or to do other things. But I'm not going to talk, that's a joke, by the way. I'm not going to talk for 30 minutes. I understand, Gabrielle, do you have a presentation? Okay. We want to give another open mic opportunity for folks who want to come up and speak their minds. And one of the other things our colleagues in the libraries did ask us to do was to again highlight some of the collections that we have here that librarians have made accessible for us in Black studies and African American history. Now, we mentioned these throughout the afternoon. I want to preface this by saying also that I want to welcome each and every one of you to an event we're having at 5 p.m. at Library East, which is we're welcoming back UF Professor Emerita, Dr. Gwendolyn Zohara Simmons, and a book has just been written about her titled State on Freedom by a dear friend of mine, Professor Dan Berger from the University of Washington. And so Dan is flying in from Washington. In fact, I think he's just arrived. Zohara is coming back to campus, and we're going to get together at 5 p.m. And they're going to have a bunch of those books. You can purchase them. We'll get to hear Zohara talk about what Mississippi was like in the early 60s and what it was like to be in the Black freedom struggle and to essentially live a life in the struggle. And when she arrived here, she taught about women in Islam, African American studies, and different aspects of Black studies. So that event is at 5 p.m. Again, I want to highlight to you some other events coming up. March 21st, Dr. Rebekah Cordova talked about how do we bring African American history to K through 12 classrooms. Already, I know some of you do this work. So as we're winding up here, moving to the last really 25 minutes of our Black Studies teach-in, this is the action phase. This is the where do we go from here phase. We heard from Mr. Blunt, one of the great historians of Florida, who has committed his life to teaching African and African American history to people from all walks of life, from all age groups. So the call to action here is how can each of us promote his work, make his work easier, make Dr. Cordova's work easier about getting Black studies into K through 12 classrooms. Because we're incredibly blessed here at the University of Florida. I can tell you again, growing up in a neighborhood or neighborhoods where we never talked about college, we had no connection to any college or higher education whatsoever. Every day when I walk on this campus, I'm just blown away every single day of my life because I cannot even fathom what it's like to have these types of resources. So we have them here, and I'm going to run through a list of them in a few moments, but I want to challenge us, how do we get the resources we have here, these incredible talks we've heard from students, staff, and faculty, how do we connect to larger communities? And not just teaching, I'm not saying that we have the right or the ability at the University of Florida to go out into Gainesville and do like a missionary thing and uplift and teach people. That's not what I'm saying at all. My call to action is, what can we do here at the University of Florida to learn from the communities around us? Because oral history, and I have the great honor of directing the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, is not about going out and studying people, but it's about learning from them. If I'm interviewing you, I'm asking you to teach me. When I leave this campus to do oral histories, whether I'm going to Mexico City or Panama City, Florida, or Europe, I leave my professor cap where it belongs, in the closet on the campus. Because when I step foot off of this campus to do oral histories, I become a student again. I become a lifelong learner. So part of my challenge is for us to listen, to leave the campus, to listen to people in struggling, under-resourced communities. Sophia and Krystin mentioned earlier, the percentage of black students on this campus has declined precipitously in the short period of time that I've been here as a faculty member. That's wrong. That's a terrible injustice, and it's not accidental. I talk to younger African American scholars. I talk to a lot of younger Mexican American scholars. I talk to a lot of younger Asian American scholars. And sadly, because of these attacks on black studies from the state of Florida, many younger scholars are choosing to go elsewhere. They're beginning to make that choice. They're calling me and they're saying, Professor Ortiz, I would love to be at the University of Florida, but I'm afraid that if I come here, and I've talked to young medical professionals, I've talked to young history, I've talked to Latin American studies colleagues, they've said, I'm afraid that if I come here, my identity and my calling and my profession are going to be under attack. That's what's at stake here. That's why we have to fight back. That's why, to paraphrase what Professor Hozic said earlier, black studies, this is about a material attack on the well-being of all the people of the state of Florida. And this is ground zero of this, but as Professor Nunn said, it's been going on from day one. African American studies would not have been established here without student struggle. Students the exact same age as you today, if you're a student, your peers in the late 60s and early 70s are the founders of African American studies. Your peers in the 60s and 70s were the founders of gender and women's studies. Your peers were the founders of ethnic studies and Chicano studies in California, in New York, Puerto Rican studies. It was always the students and the faculty in support, in the back where we belong, right? And so your struggle and your aspiration to build a better world and create a better society based upon diversity, based upon equity, based upon democracy and inclusion makes it possible for me to have a job, because without you, I wouldn't even have a job. As Professor Nunn said earlier about affirmative action, do you think that Duke University in 1993 would have accepted a first-generation Chicano student from a shipyard town into its PhD program without affirmative action? No, it would not. It wouldn't today. That's why it's important to support these programs. I'm the beneficiary of the Black freedom struggle. Without the Black freedom struggle of the 60s and 70s, I would not be standing here. I would not have these books to give out to you. So I think I've rambled on way too long by now, but I wanted to share just real briefly, and then do we have some accessibility slides? Okay, very good. We're going to put some slides on, or no? No slides? Okay. A few of the collections we have, and then we're going to do open mic again. Where's Sophia? Okay, so I think I've talked myself out, but I did want to mention, in the libraries, you can go to any one of the workstations here and have immediate access to tremendous resources in Black studies. Please use these in your seminar papers, in your senior thesis projects, in your community organizing work. One of the marquee collections is called the Joel Buchanan Archive of African American Oral History. Joel Buchanan was an amazing Black historian and civil rights activist in Florida. He was in that first cohort of African-American high school students who tried to break down the color barrier at Gainesville High School in 1964. He paid a terrible price in doing this. He was spat upon by his peers. The teachers at Gainesville High School told him, "You don't belong here. You'll never make it here. You're stupid." I first met Joel Buchanan when I was a grad student. I arrived here in the mid-1990s, and he all but adopted me. He took me and he said, "If you're studying Black history, you tell me what you need to make that happen." By that time, Joel Buchanan was a librarian and an archivist at the University of Florida. I met him at the reading room, the third floor. Is it the third floor or the second floor, Michelle? Library East. Second floor, okay? And I used to just listen to Joel Buchanan tell me these stories about Black history in Gainesville and Florida and beyond. And whenever a first grade class or a high school class or a university seminar at the University of Florida needed Joel Buchanan to come and give a talk about Black history, he was there. He was always there. He never said no, as far as I know. Such an incredibly intellectual, warm, kind man who suffered, who was made to suffer because of this country's racism. And he carried those scars with him. But because he had those scars from being spit upon and abused and literally psychologically tortured, that's what he went through. That's what the first generation of African American students went through to integrate schools like Gainesville High School, like the University of Florida. So that's why we've named our marquee oral history collection in African American history after Joel Buchanan. So I wanted to share that with you. The University of Florida has the Joel Buchanan Archive of African American oral history. Thanks to the Black elders in Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, and other states who have told us their stories of suffering, of striving, of triumph, of overcoming. We also have, to echo what Krystin Anderson said earlier, the Mississippi Freedom Project collection. So the Joel Buchanan collection is over 1,000 oral histories. I think the Mississippi Freedom Project collection is about 300 oral histories. Those include firsthand testimonies of the civil rights activists from Freedom Summer, who created the Freedom Schools, like Zohara Simmons. Zohara Simmons, in her oral history interview, which is accessible at UF libraries, tells us that when the civil rights activists came into Laurel, Mississippi in the early 1960s for SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, right, one of the early questions, they worked with the community to build the biggest lending library in the history of Laurel, Mississippi. That young Black and white and Hispanic students, regardless of their race or background, for the first time ever, could go to a library and check out a book and talk to someone and learn about someone like Toussaint Louverture, or learn about someone like Ida B. Wells, or learn about someone like Booker T. Washington. The first time ever. It was the greatest achievement, Zahara told us in the interview, of the civil rights movement in Laurel, Mississippi. Not even the voting, that was important. Not all the other kind of, the picket signs and everything. It was the library. The library. The ability to learn and to get together with other people and to share what you learn. And guess what the Ku Klux Klan did in Laurel, Mississippi? It burned that library down. Just as it burned down many Black schools in Reconstruction in Florida. During Reconstruction, Matthew M. Louis was an African-American Civil War combat veteran, had been severely wounded at the Battle of Honey Hill, left for dead, miraculously survived. He arrived here in Reconstruction and took command of a state militia unit that defended black schools in Gainesville, because otherwise the Klan would have burned them down too, just as it burned down black churches in this town. So what I want to do now is call Krystin and Sophia, because we want to kind of, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next we will have Donovan, who is a member of our team at the Oral History Program, share with you all how you can access all of these resources that have been mentioned and all of these digital collections. Or Millie, or Gabrielle. Or will it be Gabrielle? Somebody from SPOP. Thanks, Gabrielle.
No problem. So I just wanted to show you guys, when materials aren't always shown in your classes, there are ways to go and search out material yourself. So, for example, if you go onto here, you can find the Joel Buchanan Archive under projects. And we have a number of projects you can go through. There's, for example, pandemic oral history, or the Ottoman Greeks, the United States. We have Native American history, veterans history. You can go through any of these, and there'll be, interviews straight from people who experience these things themselves, which is important because you're learning from people who actually experience these things, and they're talking for themselves about their experiences. So this is the Joel Buchanan Archive, and you can go through here, and it tells you about the archive and the contents of it. And then, say you want to go to the digital archives, you can get access to the UF digital collection, and that connects you to the library. Thank you, library. And so you're connected to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Archive. And so let's just type in Joel. Let's hope I can spell this right. I'm going to type in Joel Buchanan. And then you go here, and boom, we have an interview from 1986 from Joel Buchanan himself about his experiences at SPOP. And if you click on this, then you can hear like a real historical figure talk about his life at UF. And it's just important that you guys know that this is here, because there's so much information at UF, it's hard to parse through all of it. And so we just wanted to show you that SPOP has resources to connect you to Black history in a time when that's being kind of litigated. So this is Joel Buchanan talking about his life. I can connect you guys to one more, so I'm not keeping you here looking at a screen for too long. But so let's look into Native American history. We'll see what there is for Native American history. So here you can change the type of content to audio. And then it should give us transcriptions of Native American history. So here there's another interview from our Native American history collection. And so this is just a small presentation so you guys know how to access stuff for yourself when it's not always presented to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gabrielle. All right, so with all of that being said, a lot of us have said a lot of things, and now it's everyone else's turn too. So the mic is open. If anyone wants to come up and share anything, come on up. And after that, I will also like to go around the room and hear from all of you guys. So anyone want to come up and share? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Snehi. I'm a fourth-year anthropology major. I just want to say thank you to everyone who hosted this event. This was really important work, and I'm glad somebody's doing it. I wrote like an entire thing since like 12:30 since I've been here, but I'll make it really short. So I came to UF in the fall of 2019, and I was really excited to kind of like learn about histories that in my public school life that I haven't learned about, or like things that weren't really given their own space. And freshman year, I took a class called, it was a quest class called Race, Empire, and Leisure with Dr. Lillian Guerra, who's part of the Latin American Studies program. And from that class, I kind of, like, I learned, like, I knew this country was based in white supremacy, and we've done a lot wrong, but that class really opened my eyes up, not to just like the harm that's done here, but all across the world. And I learned so much about like the lasting impacts of that. And then when we fast forward to today, I think it's like extremely telling that like Florida and the United States is like quickly descending into a fascist society. Banning books and restricting what can and cannot be taught is like the first and definitely not the last step into a descent of fascism. And we have seen this with Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany was not built in one day. It was intentional planning, organizing, and actions that were taken upon by fascists. And when we do talk about intersectionality, critical race theory, oppression, discrimination, it's not only crucial for us to learn about it, to learn about how our society has come to be, but it's also to come up with solutions to these. And I think most of us in this room understand that logical progression, that like we're here to like get that education and build a better tomorrow. But I don't think the state sees it that way. I think they see it as a threat. And it's a threat to like the very system that this country was built upon and works very hard to uphold. And white supremacy has been like the thing that has been built this country since day one. And to teach the youth otherwise is like a recipe for keeping entire generations silent and under control. It's a way to systemically erase entire histories. And no matter how much like the government tries to like read between lines and be like, oh, like we can't let white kids hate themselves from learning their history, or oh, like AP African American history is like doesn't translate to real jobs, whatever that means. I see right through it, and I hope a lot of us see right through it. And I feel like sometimes when we talk about this, like I feel like it looks like we have a tinfoil on our hats. Like it's not conspiracies. Like all of this has been going on for a long time. And like the faculty at UF, at the African American department, and all of the scholars all across the country, they've been discussing this for a long time. Nobody listens though. Nobody wants to listen to the experts, and we've seen that with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Nobody wants to listen to experts who have dedicated their entire lives to studying something, and here we have politicians making up random stuff about things that they have completely no idea about. And we've seen this like way before too. Like we have seen this with like the civil rights movement. Like the Black Panther Party was like heavily, like there was like counterintelligence projects propped up to bring down any sort of resistance and any sort of building for like a better future. So like this is all stuff that we know, and people say that like people who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and honestly that is quite true. But then also people, I feel like, don't really realize that like organizing and like doing things like this is very important. Like we can read the books and adopt the theory, but like putting that into practice is very important. And like as much as it's like very cheesy and cringy, oh like Gen Z is the action of change, yada yada yada, like students are the voice of the people. Honestly, like there is a level of truth to that, and like I think it's worth taking time as students to really apply pressure to the university, because the universities and universities in general across the country are they're houses for knowledge production, and if that knowledge production is not given enough thought, I think we as a society are doomed to fail. Just not to be a doomer, but like that truly is the case. And also like the whole like people over politics thing that people bring up to this, I think is a bit misguided because like everything is political, innately everything that we do is political, and to realize that and to do better is the best way forward. And yeah.
Do you want to add something? Did anyone else want to come up and speak? Okay. Dr. Ortiz, did you have any?
All right, so we're getting ready to close out, but one last Black History Month quiz. Oh, we have a shirt too. So look at this shirt. Black History is American History. So the Black History Month, well, yeah, round of applause, thank you. Black History is. So the Black History Month question to win this wonderful t-shirt is, it was the name of an individual who was mentioned earlier. And I'll even give you another clue. Professor Kenneth Nunn mentioned the individual who was never allowed to go here as a student, as a Black student at the University of Florida, but his struggle allowed the first generation of African American students to attend the University of Florida. Who is the name of that individual? Virgil Hawkins. Yes, thank you. And your name is?
Hennessy.
Hennessy, thank you. You've been here all day. Wonderful, thank you, Hennessy. So, okay, so the last giveaway we have, and it's almost 3 p.m. So first of all, give yourselves a round of applause. Some of you have been here since noon. Many of you participated in the walkout. And as we close down, I just want to let you know, and just thank you for participating today, doing the walkout, spreading the word about the importance of African American history and Black studies. But you know this is not the end of it, right? Today, the state, a politician in the state of Florida passed or filed a bill, didn't pass a bill, but filed a bill to radically destroy public higher education in the state of Florida. Parts of that bill include the banning of critical race theory on our level here at the University of Florida. Critical race theory, by the way, is already banned in K through 12 education. Part of that bill, which is being proposed today, it's HB 999, I believe, is to eliminate any system of job security in the public sector in Florida, and including tenure, okay? Part of that bill is to so undermine the ability of us to hire top quality faculty and to give that power to the state of Florida, just to hand that power, okay? So what I'm saying is the struggle is just beginning. And you heard from Professor Nunn, Professor Austin, Dr. Levy. They've been in this fight for decades. And now what we're saying is we need more people to join the fight. And it's great we have the great turnout today, but we need more people. We just need more freedom soldiers. And so what I'm going to urge us to do is to continue to recruit family, friends. Anytime you want to do an event that hinges on history, you can call the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. And the reason we can make that promise is that we're backed up by so many great colleagues at Marston Science Library and African American Studies, Gender and Women's Studies, and so many other programs. But the last trivia question I have before we finish today is about Black higher education. I'm thinking of a HBCU, Historically Black College and University. I'm thinking about the woman who founded that university originally as a college for young African American women who arrived in Florida in the most unpromising moment in the world to try to start a college for young black women. And when she arrived in the state of Florida in 1904, Florida had the highest per capita lynching rate in the United States of America. Higher than Mississippi, higher than Alabama, higher than Louisiana. And this woman educator rose to such prominence that she became the most important Floridian of the 20th century by far. No one else is even, I mean, A. Philip Randolph is up there, Reverend Howard Thurman, but this person, she's at the apex. She's the first black woman in the history of this country who has a statue dedicated to her in the National Statuary Hall in our nation's capital. She is formative, and Professor Aida Hozic said earlier, the importance of black scholars in the founding of international public policy. This African American woman was pivotal in establishing the idea of not just equality within nations, but equality between nations in her work in the United Nations in San Francisco when it was founded. What woman am I talking about? Students, if you've already won an earlier book, I'm going to be looking to other folks. What African American female educator in the state of Florida am I talking about? Yes. Yes, Mary McLeod, the winner. Thank you. And your name is?
Brianna.
Brianna, thank you. Thank you, Brianna. So as we close out, again, I hope that you'll join us in just a couple of hours at Library East to celebrate the return of Dr. Zohara Simmons to University of Florida campus at 5 p.m. I hope that you'll use our incredible Black Studies and Black History collections at UF. I hope that you will talk to your state representatives and share with them why Black Studies is important. I hope that you'll talk to your president at the University of Florida and tell him why you think Black Studies is important. I hope you'll talk to your faculty, including those who spoke today, and tell us why Black Studies matters, why it's important, because we need your energy to keep moving along. And in conclusion, I'll hand the mic over to my colleague, Krystin, because I don't have anything else to say. I'm so emotionally wrought up right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You have a question?
I just wanted to make something clear.
Yeah.
When I came in, I might have frightened a lot of you, but I just want to make it clear that I'm not affiliated with any sort of hate group. I was dressed up as the Mud Wizard, which to me just represents a figure that stands up to the powerful, that fights back when they try to stand in the way of progress and try to make the world worse for everyone. Like, if you're not familiar with the clip, it was at the climate protest where Greta Thunberg was arrested. The Mud Wizard was this guy just dressed up in this outfit that was just wading through the mud, like very easily, while all the cops around were just struggling, just even standing in the mud. And he would push them over and just laugh in their face and just overall communicate with them. And I guess why I'm standing up and saying this is just that I want to remind everyone here that it's scary to stand up to these people, obviously, because they want to unironically kill you. They want to expel you from society. But you need to remember that you always need to fight back. You need to spit in these people's faces and laugh at them always and make them feel like the insects that they are.
We love the Mud Wizard. The Mud Wizard is invited back. So, as Dr. Ortiz said, tonight we have our next event, book signing event with Dr. Zohara Simmons. Please come out to that. Library East, which is right by Library West, room 100, and it will be a really good conversation. But thank you all so much for coming, for staying, for talking, for learning. Please talk to anyone and everyone who is up here, from the professors, the students, the SPOP staff. Everyone who's up here cares about this and does this for real. So please talk to every one of us, all of us, ask questions, stay involved, and look out on the social media for what we're doing next. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm Rose. I'm with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. I wanted to know your name and what you study.
My name is Sarah Ekahoho. I am a microbiology major.
Okay, awesome. And what brings you here to this event today?
Yeah, so I actually did this spontaneously. I heard about it like 1 hour before, but I feel like it's really important to recognize marginalized and minority communities. And by us being here, it really shows power in numbers and how we need to acknowledge the inclusion and diversity and how people are being shut down for what they believe in. And I really think it's important for us to acknowledge this. And I'm glad we're all here today to show this.
Awesome. And then I also wanted to ask you what you hope the future of Florida education will look like, or the future of education here in this country.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell because all of this is rooted in the system, so it's very systemic. So it's really hard to figure out what to do. But if we can create some change and have more inclusion and diversity in our teachings, maybe it can go somewhere. I'm a firm believer of abolishing the system, but I do believe there is actions being put in place to try and change things for now. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for coming out to this event today that SPOP has put on. So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome.
You were all black, I wore all black. I just, yeah.
But you ate. I did not eat.
You ate, don't say that. Yeah. Thank you for hosting me.
I don't even know how to take that one.
We're trying to get information about the Mississippi trip.
Yeah, we should have had it here, but I can get the form for you right now.
Okay, thank you.
I don't even know how to take that one.
We're trying to get information about the Mississippi trip.
Yeah, we should